Welcome. On this fifth Sunday of Lent, we continue our gospel readings in the book of John. Today's reading from the 11th chapter of John, we have that most famous story of Jesus raising and healing Lazarus. The Gospel of John is unique from the other three Gospels in that it is not so much biographical as it is theological. It was written by an early church community at the turn of the first century. They were not contemporaries of Jesus, but rather a gathering of believers that were passionate about patterning their lives on the teachings of Jesus. They had discovered that this manner of living was the way to truth and life. A hallmark of this gospel is the fact that it contains no miracles. When inexplicable events occur, the writer does not call them miracles, but rather signs. In John's gospel, these signs are used to significant narrative effect. The role of a sign is to point away from itself and direct our attention to something more important. We should not be distracted by the sign, but instead look to where it leads. Each of John's signs direct us to a truth about God's relationship to this world. The 7 signs begin with a wedding and end with a funeral. At the wedding in Cana, when Jesus turns water into wine, the sign points away from the idea of limited resources to God's unlimited abundance. When Jesus heals a Roman official's son, the sign points away from a nationalist superiority to a God who claims all, regardless of race, religion, or economic class. When Jesus heals a person with paralysis on the Sabbath, the sign points away from the letter of the law to the spirit of the law, stating that people are more important than rules. When Jesus feeds the 5,000, the sign points away from focusing on apparent supply to engaging divine creativity to ensure essential resources are distributed to all people. When Jesus walked on water, the sign pointed away from fear to powers greater than the physical laws of nature in this dimension. When Jesus gave sight to the man born blind, the sign points away from toxic judgmental attitudes to spiritual sight beyond physical seeing. And in today's gospel, when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, the sign points away from the finality of death to life beyond our understanding of death. Each sign points to the spiritual destination of trust and faith in the God who is known as love. Today's gospel puts death and grief right in our face. It comes to us at a time of considerable uncertainty, at a time when the specter of untimely death hovers over the whole world. Lazarus was the beloved brother of Mary and Martha and a respected leader in his community. His death followed a brief illness during which Jesus was summoned to heal him. His unexpected death raised universal questions. Why so young? What could we have done differently? Why didn't God intervene? Why is life unfair? Mourning took on the weight of self-scrutiny and blaming. But in the end, Lazarus was still dead. This is a revealing story of grief, disappointment, and anger that accompanies the death of someone dearly loved. Jesus didn't arrive till after the burial, creating an awkward expectancy. Martha, passive-aggressively, chastised Jesus for not showing up while challenging him to intervene. Mary was more straightforward, lashing out in her grief, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus was heartbroken and filled with compassion. And the narrator tells us that his spirit was heavy and that he wept. Jesus stood outside that tomb and called out, "Lazarus, come out." And there Lazarus appeared, still wrapped in the bindings of death. And so we hear the words of Jesus, "Unbind him and let him go." In this telling, we too can hear the voice of God speaking to us, calling us out from our tombs of despair, denial, and death to new life right now, right here. Perhaps grief, loss, anxiety, financial troubles, hatred, resentment, or a lack of faith has put us in our tomb of despair. But here is the activating command: unbind and go live. It is a challenge to believe that it's never too late to allow our dreams and hopes to live again, to respond as did Lazarus, and to come forth to life and to live. There are times and places when our religious imagination fails us, stops us, and we refuse to move ahead toward areas of new life and possibility. Now is precisely the time that we must listen for that voice that calls to us, that voice that wants to roll away the stone of the tomb that imprisons us, the voice that calls us to come forth and cut away those things that have bound us so tightly, the voice that reminds us that at the heart of a profound life is real pain and tragedy, but the voice that calls us to be set free. As we stand at this point on the road to Easter, we are reminded that the world will not have the last word, that we will not have the last word, but God will have the last word. It is of great importance at this time in human history that we are reminded that faith is not a set of beliefs, but rather a relationship of trust in God, whose expansiveness is beyond our human understanding, the God whose spaciousness is on display in the mysteries of the creation that spans universes beyond what we have yet discovered. Yet a God who has endowed each one of us with a piece of the holy image, the God who calls us each by name. This reality empowers us to live in hope, not the hope of a projected future of our choosing, but in the fullness of life today and each day that we are alive. We might cower in fear before this pandemic. We might get lost in despair, caught in grief that is not ours yet. We might be overwhelmed by the media's sightless projections of what is not known. We might feel overwhelmed by systemic sadness. We might have forgotten the words of Jesus, "I have come that you might have life, and to experience it as abundance." It is an act of hope amid this crisis to embrace abundant living, cooking a beautiful meal, tending our gardens, photographing beauty, reading a book, making music, arts, and crafts, cleaning out long unused and cluttered spaces, watching a funny movie. These are all examples of holy work right now. Reframe isolation as sanctuary. Make friends with silence. Reach out by phone, text, or email, or Zoom these days, to family and with those who you have lost touch. Participate in online communities. Stand outside your home and sing with your neighbors. These are actions of connection. Look for local and safe opportunities to serve. Comfort the bereaved. Encourage the frightened. Share resources with those that have less. Drop off meals for those who cannot cook, and toilet paper for those who could not brave the lines at Costco. These are actions of love. To find the joy and hope of Easter, we must go through the cemeteries of our defeats and disappointments. We must let go of our desperation and hopelessness so that we can be radically changed, open to new opportunities, filled with hope and new life. Let us pray. Holy One, where stones are blocking our lives and sealing us off from the power of your love and hope. Roll them away and let us know of your goodness and grace this day. Amen.